This is Judith Lay welcoming you to Manx Radio and to the podcast of this week's edition of At Your Service.
Manx Radio!
As I'm sure you know, yesterday marked 60 years of Manx Radio. But without our loyal listeners, we simply couldn't have survived. So this is really the time to say a massive thank you for tuning our way. Looking at the world from a Christian viewpoint has always had a place in some form on Manx Radio. We don't have archive material from the early days, but I do have lots of material from the last 26 or so years when I've had the immense privilege of meeting some truly wonderful people with inspirational stories. And so, on this birthday weekend, I thought we'd listen again to a few of my favourite moments from my Christian programming archive. Discussing television programmes isn't something we've often done, but a new comedy series on BBC Two in 2010 became one of the most popular that year, and certainly got clergy and churchgoers talking. Here's how I reported on it 14 years ago. Rev has just finished a 6-week series on BBC television. Tom Hollander plays the Reverend Adam Smallbone, a Church of England vicar newly promoted from a sleepy rural parish to the busy inner-city world of St Saviour's in East London. It's a world that he has little experience of, and it shows. Through 6 episodes that chart the efforts of this well-meaning man attempting to meet the demands of a modern inner-city church with a depleted congregation. In addition to caring for his flock, Adam has to worry about the financial burden of running a huge, decaying building. At this point, I must make a plea to you. If you didn't see the television series at all, or you saw a few moments of it and hated it, please don't turn off the radio, because what follows isn't a discussion about a television show, but it's a painfully honest and very revealing exchange of views on what it really means to be in ordained ministry today. For their research, actor Tom Hollander and writer James Wood spent a year with a handful of friendly vicars in Boston, London and Salisbury. Now, this is the point at which this feature really stops being about a television series and becomes instead all about the real world of ordained ministry. Joining me in the studio now, Reverend Marc Wolverson, Vicar of All Saints. I'm also welcoming Gareth Moore, well-known church organist and musical director. I asked Marc Wolverson what he thought of the fictional television Rev.
I think it was very refreshing because for the first time on broadcast television, we've seen for once the clergy not portrayed as bumbling, awkward figures who are eccentric and who can't be approached by the public. What we saw in this series was, in a very humorous light, but in a very realistic light, an ordinary parish priest portrayed as a real human being. And what we have to remember is that clergy are just ordinary Christians, ordinary people, trying to get on with their lives to follow what they feel in their conscience is their calling. But they love the Lord, and they're trying to express that in the best way they can, which means they're full of the frailties and the fallibilities that we all have, and they're trying to work that out and make the gospel of Jesus known.
What about, do you think, the way it's portrayed church-going people?
Well, those are all realistic situations. I mean, throughout my ministry, you always get people who are knocking at the vicarage door, who are in need of help or money or don't know what to do with themselves. People like the homeless gentleman who was washing the windows in the first couple of episodes. This is not an exaggeration. This happens, and it's part of the fabric of parish life, that there are all kinds of people within the parish community. And it's one of the joys and blessings of being a parish priest is that you get to interact and listen and deal with all these kind of situations.
Gareth Moore, now you are known island-wide as an organist and one who is most willing to go into any church of any denomination anywhere on the island and play as required. Now, that must give you another sight on ministry. What did you think of the series and what do you think it's doing for ministry?
Well, it was recommended to me by a friend to watch Rev. They thought I'd enjoy it, and I certainly did. I found so many similarities with the Anglican Church at present. It was so refreshing, though, to see Adam, the vicar, in such a human way. I think it's really given people food for thought. The programme just gave people that chance to see that you don't have to be somebody who's absolutely perfect, that you're just a normal human being who just is really seeking to do the best for God and for others.
Hopefully people will see, well, I couldn't have imagined myself doing that. But now that I've seen, an ordinary human being who has ordinary banter with people, who says honest prayers, who even picks his nose, he's called to be a priest. Well, maybe I can do that too. And as far as the humour is concerned, I mean, one of the things I've always believed about ministry is that you've got to be yourself, and you've got to be able to laugh at yourself. And for many clergy, this programme has given us the ability to laugh, not just at Adam, but at ourselves, because we're seeing ourselves through him.
Looking at clergy as somebody who's not ordained, we are very quick to judge if, they accidentally swear or they're wearing their jeans instead of their suit to take their sermon. We forget just how long it takes to prepare a sermon, how long it takes for those thoughts to come together, and all we moan about is that it's too long, it's too short, didn't talk about the right things, didn't give the message that we wanted. And I think, we really need to be aware of these things.
I think the other thing that comes through is the real sense of calling. Despite our inadequacies, God calls us to serve. And one of the most moving bits of the whole series for me was the very end. As Adam is brought to minister to a dying woman, he recites those very moving words from Isaiah, who shall I send? Send me. And those are the words that are said at the ordination of deacons. I think at that point I had tears in my eyes because it just reminded me about what it's all about. Yes, even when we're feeling like completely awful because we've had a rotten day and everyone's been disagreeing with us, God still calls us, and he still uses our gifts to make a difference in people's lives and to minister to them at the happiest and saddest moments, the most important moments of their lives. And if that's not a selling point for people to discern vocation, I don't know what is.
I, the Lord of sea and sky, I have heard my people cry, all who dwell in dark and sin, my hand will save. I who made the stars of night, I will make their darkness bright. Who will bear my light to them? Whom shall I send? Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord? I have heard you calling in the night. I will go, Lord, if you lead me. I will hold your people in my heart. I, the Lord of wind and flame, I will tend the poor and lame. I will set a feast for them, my hand will save. Finest bread I will provide, till their hearts be satisfied. I will give my life to them. Whom shall I send? Here I am, Lord. Is it I, Lord?
a much-loved hymn of dedication, Here I Am, Lord. And before that, you heard a conversation recorded in 2010 after the first series of Rev. Our encounters with the ups and downs of parish life ended in 2014 at the end of Series 3, during which Adam, the vicar, resigns and applies for a new job outside the church. And that's when he realises, in spite of all the challenges and difficulties, being a priest is what he is and always will be. Commenting on the programme was Reverend Marc Wolverson, who left the island in 2013 and is now in ministry in the Diocese of Blackburn in Lancashire. Just a few days ago, he celebrated the 27th anniversary of his ordination. He's also a regular presenter on the community radio station Radio Leyland. We also heard from Gareth Moore, who is still a wonderful organist. He's also an inspirational teacher and musical director at Trinity Methodist Church at Rosemount here in Douglas. He's also training to become a Methodist local preacher and is already a popular worship leader. For many years, Thought for the Day and Just a Minute were regular features here on Manx Radio, with a big rota of contributors made up of ordained ministers and lay people, coordinated by willing volunteers. I'm thinking especially here of Keith Tier and Nancy Clegg. It was through these features that we heard many stories and met lots of characters, including this one created by popular vicar Rev'd Norman Kelly.
Hey Billy, I'm sorry to hear about your Uncle Fred. How's your Auntie Flo getting on? What, not doing very well? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, like. But you know, Billy, it's early days yet and people handle this sort of thing at their own pace. Give her time. Don't crowd her out. Make sure she knows you all care, but give her space. You know what I mean? What, she keeps going on about it? That's great. Let her talk as much as she likes. You watch. As time goes on, she'll start talking about the good times that they had years ago. You what? Hey, listen, Sconhead. Don't tell her to be brave. Get her to have a good cry. Take her a box of tissues and let her get her emotions out. And then, hey, Billy, take her up onto Douglas Head when the boat's going out. Let her watch it go over the horizon and disappear, and then point out to her that's just because she can't see it. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's still there. So is Uncle Fred. He's still Fred. And much nearer God. Ta-da.
Former Vicar of Moraun, Reverend Ian Davies, used his Just a Minute to give us lots of valuable relationship advice, like this.
10 Secrets of a Happy Relationship. Number 6. Never miss an opportunity of going to the toilet. Many relationships are founded on this one. Our car journeys frequently contain the line, "But I didn't want to go before we set out." We have to take our chances when they come, because they may not be there later. Last week, I saw a wonderful pair of walking shoes reduced from £90 to £30. I tried them on, and they fitted wonderfully. I went away to think about it. And you can guess the rest of the story. So, if you have a chance to study, to take up a new hobby, to remake an old friendship, or repair a current one, then take it while it's there, because it might not be there later.
Reverend Alex Brown, now a pioneer minister in Douglas, once managed to take us people-watching in the jungle with someone sounding remarkably like David Attenborough. But here, he's inspired by his dad's taste in music.
I've always been a huge Billy Joel fan since I was a kid, listening to my dad play his music. Some of his stuff has been hugely uplifting and positive, but not all of it. Billy Joel's always been the kind of artist to write honestly about the shadows as well as the light, and a musician unafraid to explore the human condition. You know, what is it that makes us human? His song River of Dreams explores the search for meaning and the search for the spiritual that the vast majority of the planet would recognise as an essentially human characteristic. He writes these lyrics: "In the middle of the night I go walking in my sleep, through the valley of fear to a river so deep, and I've been searching for something taken out of my soul, something I would never lose, something somebody stole.
In the middle of the night, I go walking in my sleep through the valley of fear to a river so deep. I'm searching for something taken out of my soul, something I'd never lose, something somebody stole.
For the global faith movement we call Christianity, this search for a spiritual home, or answer, finds its rest in the ancient revolutionary Jesus. And for me, I found as a teenager growing up in the 80s that faith positions, my own faith position in particular, was often ridiculed or scorned or seen as childish. I felt, with Billy Joel and with millions of others, that my faith was somehow being stolen away from me. So today, may we reverse that subtle atmosphere which seeks to put faith as a side issue and therefore impoverishes the humanity of 3/4 of our globe. May we encourage this search for the spiritual and enable all of us to find a spiritual home.
The oldest recording that we're featuring today was made in 1998 when we had a visit from Rabbi Lionel Blue. He loved to tell stories. He was happy to tell stories against himself. He loved jokes, but he also loved to challenge his listeners.
A rabbi prayed to God and he said, could he see heaven and hell? And God said, okay, I'll give you that if you want it. And the rabbi found himself before a great door, and the door opened, and inside there was a big table, round table, and in the center of the table there was a pot of the most delicious stew you can possibly imagine. You know, it's boeuf bourguignon, ragout of lamb, Irish stew, mix them all together. That was the flavor of it. And kosher too. And that was the miracle. And around the edge of the table were all the diners. But all the diners were shrieking with hunger in that place, because the spoons they had in their hand were so big that when they put them in the stew, they could not get those spoons back into their mouths. The spoons were just too big. So they were fainting and starving with hunger in that place where there was plenty. And the rabbi heard their shrieks and said to God, take me to the other place, take me to heaven. And to his relief, the doors closed. The sound of the shrieks stopped. And the rabbi then found himself before a very similar door. And the door opened and the rabbi nearly passed out, because there was exactly the same situation. There was the same table, there was the same delicious pot of stew, there were the diners round it who had exactly the same spoons. But the difference this time was that they were using those spoons to feed each other. That was the difference between heaven and hell. We have all the ingredients for heaven and hell among us now. And whether Europe is going to be a place for heaven, peace, the kind of peace we've seen in Western Europe for 50 years, the first 50 years of peace that Western Europe has ever known, or whether it will be the hell of the concentration camps, the Stalinist gulags, who can say? It is really up to us. But some people say that God will intervene. Surely God will take a hand in all this. I was in South Germany, and a lot of my friends were going to the site of a concentration camp there. And I decided I wouldn't join them because I'd had too much of those things and they gave me nightmares. So I stayed in a little church, and I remember it was by a railway line. A train passed, and I remember thinking, my God, that must have been the line on which all those cattle trucks of human misery must have gone to the concentration camps. And then something burst out of me. I said to God, I said, I pray, I said, why on earth didn't you take a hand in it? Because think of how many prayers must have been said in those cattle trucks, which were never answered in any way that we can understand. And I sat back exhausted, and I said to myself, but how can God take a hand in it, because he has no hands. And then, as I went out of the church, a thought suddenly came into my mind. I suddenly thought that we are God's hands in this world, you and I. We are probably the only hands that God possesses. So a question to God, why didn't you take a hand in it, is really a question, boomerangs back to us. Why don't we take a hand in it? And another thought occurred to me, that the only power that God has in this world is the love that God inspires in us. That is an enormous power, but it is the only one, I think, on offer.
Love is flowing like a river, flowing out through you and me, spreading out into the desert, setting all the captives free. Joy is flowing like a river, flowing out through you and me, spreading out into the desert, setting all the captives free. Peace is flowing like a river, flowing out through you and me, spreading out into the desert, setting all the captives free. Setting all the captives
This morning we were looking back through our archive recordings as part of Manx Radio's 60th anniversary weekend. On next week's programme, we'll be right back in the present day, hearing from the newly appointed President and Vice President of the Methodist Conference and chatting with Angela Southern, who'll be taking us from St Mark's to Sierra Leone, and all from the comfort of your armchair. And now, as usual, we'll finish with a look at our notice board, beginning today with a reminder about the Festival of Hymns taking place this afternoon in St Thomas's Church here in Douglas. It's a 2 o'clock start for the practice for choirs and 4:30 if you'd just like to come to the festival service, which will be packed with your favourite hymns. Then this evening, the Mariners Choir will be in the Doon for a service starting as usual at 6:30. Mrs. Sarah Shimmin is the soloist, and the service will be led jointly by Reverends Ian Foles and Joe Dudley, with supper and community hymn singing afterwards. This Wednesday, the series of summer evening concerts in St Thomas's Church here in Douglas continues with an hour of popular music from Mine's a Shanty, starting at the usual time of 7:45. It's free admission with refreshments afterwards and a retiring collection, and St Thomas's Church is just off Douglas Promenade, close to the Gaiety Theatre and the Villa Marina complex. In the parish of Rushen, their Thursday evening series of summer concerts starts this week, Thursday, the 4th of July, but not in St Catherine's Church in Port Erin this year due to work taking place there. The weekly concerts every Thursday night will now be in the Erin Arts Centre with a 7:30 start time, and the first concert in the series this Thursday evening will be by Meadowside Choral Society. Admission is free and there will be refreshments available afterwards. Tuesday the 2nd is the first day of a flower festival in 6 churches in the south of the island, all open from the 2nd to the 7th of July from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. each day. The theme is By the Seaside, another celebration of 200 years of the RNLI. Participating churches are Rushen Parish Church in Port Erin, the Abbey Church in Ballasalla, St Mark's Church, Maloo Parish Church, Arbury Parish Church, and St Mary on the Harbour in Castletown. Going to the west now, and there's a very special weekend in Dalby. On Friday the 5th, Dalby Church will be celebrating Tynwald Day with teas, lunches and plenty of home-cooked traditional Manx fare, served from 12 noon till 4:30 in the Dalby schoolrooms and church garden, weather permitting. Then on Sunday, the 7th of July, next Sunday, there's a summer anniversary concert service in Dalby Church and schoolrooms starting at 6:30. This is a celebration of the 185th anniversary of Dalby Church and the 40th anniversary of the Friends of Dalby Church, with a concert service led by Manx Voices, who'll perform a selection of choir pieces and also lead the community hymn singing. The concert will be followed by a Dalby Tay in the schoolrooms, and everyone will be made most welcome. Next Saturday, the 6th of July, is one of the busiest this year. It's time for the Glen May Craft Market, open from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Glen May Chapel and Community Centre. Homemade produce and handicrafts by local artists, free entry with light lunches and bacon baps on sale. And all of the following events are next Saturday, July the 6th. A summer coffee morning at Baldrine Hall, open from 10:30 to 12 noon. Strawberry teas will be served in Christchurch at the Doon on the Ramsey to Laxey Coast Road, open from 2 p.m. Your strawberry tea includes sandwiches, cakes, strawberries and cream and a cup of tea. Adults £10, children £4, with takeaways available. Also next Saturday between 2 and 4 p.m, Onken Methodist Church will be holding a Tynwald weekend afternoon tea. As well as lots of stalls and other attractions, there'll be music from Debbie Gooding, the 2023 Cleveland Medal winner. Tickets are £8 for adults, with children's tickets £4. Lonvain Ladies Choir invite you to join them next Saturday for a strawberry tea in Union Mills Methodist Church Hall from 2:30 to 4 p.m. Admission, which includes your strawberry tea, is just £4. There'll be stalls and a raffle, and the choir will sing for you. And I'm afraid that's all that we've time for now, but I'll be back later in our virtual lounge tonight from 9 o'clock onwards, with virtually everything you'll need to round off your day. But the easy listening music and your requests and dedications are very real, and I'd love you to join me if you can. So till whenever we meet again, this is Judith saying thank you for listening, and I wish you and those you love a blessed and peaceful week, and a very good morning.